500 dragons surrounded the alien sisters, but a human walked in alone and changed everything. The wind was soft, and the twin moons of Varelia hung peacefully in the evening sky. Princess Sarah stood on the tall balcony of her palace, her long, silver hair glowing in the moonlight. Beside her, her younger sister Lyra laughed as fireflies circled her fingers. The world was quiet, calm, and beautiful. But then the light changed. The moons were still there, but a dark shadow began to crawl across the sky. Sarah stopped smiling. The stars disappeared, one by one. A strange rumble rolled in, deep and powerful, like 1,000 drums beating under the earth. Lyra pointed up, her voice trembling. "Sister, what is that?" Sarah didn't answer. Her eyes locked on the sky above. Then they both saw it: wings. Hundreds of massive wings, stretching across the sky like black cloth. Dragons, so many dragons. They looked like a swarm of night itself. The castle alarms began to scream. Guards ran through the halls, shouting, "Get the royal sisters to safety." But it was too late. A wall of fire exploded near the forest line. The sky burned red, and the wind became heat. Sarah pulled Lyra into the hallway, but the castle walls shook from a loud crash. A dragon had landed on the outer tower, another. One landed in the courtyard, then another, then 10 more, in minutes. The castle was surrounded. Sarah and Lyra ran to the lower levels, their guards staying behind to fight. They hid inside the sacred chamber, where no one but the royal blood could enter. Lyra was crying, but Sarah held her close, trying to be strong. "They'll protect us," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure anymore. But silence fell again. No more screaming, no more fire, only heavy breathing, deep and low, like giants outside the chamber walls. Then something began to scratch the stone door. The lock cracked. The dragons were coming inside. Lyra gasped. "There's no one left." Sarah held her tighter, closing her eyes, waiting for the end. Then a sound came, different from the dragons. Footsteps, slow and steady, walking on ashen stone. Not heavy like a dragon, not sharp like claws, just soft human steps. The sisters froze. The stone door groaned and slowly opened. Smoke poured in, and behind it stood a tall figure. Not a soldier, not an alien, not a dragon. A human. His clothes were torn, covered in dust and blood. His face was tired, but calm. He had no weapons, just a glowing stone around his neck behind him. The dragons growled, but none attacked. Lyra whispered, "Is he with them?" Sarah didn't know, but she stepped forward carefully. "Who are you?" she asked. The human looked at her, eyes full of old pain and deep strength. "I'm the last speaker of the Flame Treaty," he said softly. "I came because you're not supposed to die today." A massive dragon stepped behind him, eyes burning like suns. It leaned close to the human, but didn't attack. Instead, it bowed. Sarah gasped. A dragon had bowed to a human. More dragons appeared around the chamber, circling the human and the sisters. 5, 10, 20. Then too many to count. The entire chamber lit up in firelight, but none of it burned them. It was like the flames were waiting. The human turned to the sisters and said, "You've broken something ancient, but maybe we can fix it before the fire spreads too far." Sarah didn't understand, but something in her heart said this man had come for a reason, maybe even a destiny. Outside, the rest of the sky turned completely black, but inside the sacred chamber, a new light began to shine, soft, golden, and old. The dragons watched, silent and respectful, and the human stood alone between two worlds, ready to change everything. The air was heavy inside the ruined chamber, filled with heat, smoke, and silence. Lyra held her breath, too scared to move. Sarah stood beside the human, not knowing why she trusted him, but something deep in her bones told her to stay near him. The dragons surrounded them like a living wall of teeth, wings and fire, but they didn't attack, not yet. The human reached into a small pouch at his side, pulling out something round and smooth. It glowed softly in his hand, a stone, but not just any stone. It pulsed like it had a heartbeat, like It was alive. The dragons leaned in closer, their giant heads lowering. Eyes fixed on the glowing object, Sarah whispered, "What is that?" The human didn't look at her. He only said, "It's not what, it's who." Then he knelt slowly on the cracked floor, holding the stone up high. A deep sound filled the chamber, like thunder in reverse. The dragons all dropped their heads. Lower, some even folded their wings. Lyra gripped Sarah's hand tightly. "They're listening to him," she whispered. But Sarah shook her head slowly. "No." "They're obeying." The human began to speak in a strange language. His voice calm but firm. The words were thick, old, and powerful, too ancient for the sisters to understand. The walls began to vibrate softly, and the firelight around them dimmed to a soft orange glow. Outside, the dragons that had circled the castle were landing quietly, lining up in rows. Even the sky seemed to wait. When he finished speaking, the human stood and faced the two sisters. "The dragons came here to destroy, because they thought you broke the pact," he said. "But I showed them the truth. The seal is still active." Sarah stepped forward. "You speak their language." He nodded. "Not just speak, I carry their memory, their pain, their laws." Lyra looked confused. "But you're human. How can they obey you?" He looked down at his hand and then back up at them. "Because once, long ago, my people died to protect their kind. And dragons never forget a blood debt." Before anyone could speak again, the ground suddenly shook. A loud roar echoed through the castle, deeper and angrier than before. The human's expression changed. "Serious now, he's coming," he said quietly. "Who's coming?" Sarah asked quickly. "The one who doesn't believe in peace," he said. "Drakkar the Red." The chamber doors burst open with a blast of heat, and the oldest dragon stepped in. He was twice the size of the others, with blood-red scales and golden scars across his face. His eyes burned with rage as he growled, "Human, you have no right to speak for us." The other dragons lowered their heads in silence, not daring to challenge him. The human stepped forward without fear. "I have the seal, Drakkar, and you know what that means." Drakkar growled again, smoke spilling from his mouth. "The seal is old. The time of humans is over." He turned to the sisters. One of them touched the sacred gem. She must pay with fire. Lyra stepped back, terrified. Hiding behind her sister, Sarah raised her arm. "If you want her, you must take me too," Drakkar laughed, the sound echoing like thunder. "Very well." He raised his head and opened his mouth, ready to unleash fire, but the human stepped in front of them, arms wide. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the heat. "I challenge you, Drakkar." The dragons gasped, backing away in shock. Even Sarah stared at him, confused. "You're going to fight him?" she asked. The human didn't move. His eyes locked on Drakkar's. Not with blades, not with fire, with memory. The great dragon stopped, blinking slowly, his fire dying down. Then he said one word, deep and slow. "Name." The human took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Thalin of the Ashwind." Drakkar froze, completely still, his mouth closed, and his wings folded in. The name hung in the air like magic. Finally, the great dragon stepped back and lowered his head. "You carry his blood." The other dragons gasped again, this time in awe. The sisters looked at the human with new eyes, wondering who he really was. Outside, the sky was still dark, but inside the chamber, something had changed. Not just a moment of survival, something ancient had returned, a spark of forgotten peace, lit by one human, alone, facing 500 dragons. The fire in the chamber faded, but the tension stayed heavy in the air. Sarah's hands trembled, even though the flames were gone. Lyra clung to her, staring at the human like he was something from a dream. The dragons stood still, silent as stone, their eyes following his every breath. Even Drakkar, the fiercest of them all, had bowed his head, but no one really knew why. The human turned slowly, facing the two sisters. "I didn't come here by chance," he said, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "You carry something. And the dragons think it belongs to them. Lyra shook her head quickly. We didn't steal anything. I just found a glowing gem near the waterfall last week. I thought it was pretty. The human's expression tightened. That pretty gem is the heartstone of Velgaruin, he said, the soul of the dragon's ancient line, lost for 1,000 years. Sarah gasped. Then why didn't they just ask for it back? He looked toward the dragons. Because they thought it was taken on purpose. Lyra touched her chest, suddenly realizing something. I still have it, she whispered. Pulling the stone from under her dress, it glowed, brighter than before, pulsing with a soft rhythm. As soon as it appeared, every dragon in the room dropped low to the ground. The stone shimmered gold and crimson, matching the colors in Drakar's own scales. The chamber filled with a low hum, like ancient music. Trapped inside the rock, but Lyra's face changed, her skin paling, her knees shaking. It's burning, she cried softly. But it won't let go. The human rushed forward, inspecting her. His fingers hovered near the gem, but didn't touch. It's bonded, he muttered. The heartstone chose her. Sarah blinked. What do you mean it chose her? Just like a dragon chooses its rider, he replied. The stone has chosen its keeper. Drakar growled low, stepping forward again. That cannot be, he rumbled. No outsider may carry the heartstone. She is not of the flame. The human stood between him and Lyra, firm like a wall. She didn't force it. Dragon, he said. It bound itself to her, and you know what that means. Drakar's eyes flared, but he didn't strike. Instead, he turned slowly and spread his wings wide. Then he spoke in the dragon tongue. Words the sisters couldn't understand. The chamber echoed with his voice, and one by one, dragons began to roar back in answer. The sound shook the walls, rattled the floor, and made the air buzz with power. Then silence, sharp and sudden. The human turned to the sisters, his face grave. They're calling a gathering, he said. All dragons across this world will come. They will decide if Lyra is worthy to carry their soul. And if not. He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah stared at her sister, her eyes wide with fear. What happens if they say no? She whispered. The human didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told her everything. Lyra wouldn't survive it. Outside the ruined chamber, shadows moved across the sky again. But these weren't just dragons. They were the elders, the ancients. The ones with horns like trees and eyes like stars. And they were coming to pass judgment inside. Lyra held the heartstone close to her. I hear them, she whispered. I hear their voices in my head. The human knelt in front of her, nodding slowly. Then it has already begun, he said. You are not just carrying their soul now. You are becoming part of it. Night had fallen, but the sky above the ruined palace was brighter than ever. Not from moons or stars, but from fire. Hundreds of dragons flew in circles above the stone towers, casting long dancing shadows over the scorched ground. Their roars echoed through the mountains, calling others from distant lands. The gathering had begun. Inside the sacred chamber, Lyra sat motionless on the cold floor, her hands clenched around the glowing heartstone, which now pulsed in time. With her heartbeat, her skin glistened with sweat, and her lips moved without sound. She was whispering, but not in her own voice. The words were old, powerful, and not from this world. Sarah paced nearby, her heart racing, her mind spinning. What's happening to her? She asked the human, who stood watching Lyra with calm eyes. She's not just holding the heartstone anymore, he said. It's awakening inside her. If the dragons accept her, she becomes a keeper of flame. And if they don't? Sarah asked again, her voice sharper this time. The human didn't blink. Then they'll burn her, and nothing will stop them. A low growl rumbled outside, and the floor began to shake. Drakar entered once again, but he wasn't alone now. Behind him walked 6 dragons, each larger and older than any before. Their eyes glowed with silver fire, and their scales shimmered like crystal. These were the Elders of Flame, the final judges of dragonkind. Drakkar raised his head, his voice deep and final. Bring her forward. Sarah stepped in front of Lyra, her hand on her sword. Even though she knew it was useless, she's not ready, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. The human placed a hand on her shoulder gently. She's already being tested, he whispered. This is not a fight of swords, Sarah. This is a battle of the soul. Lyra stood slowly, her eyes no longer the same. They glowed faintly with a golden hue, her voice distant. I can feel them inside me, she said. Their fire. Their sorrow. Their memories. She walked forward, past the dragons, past the human, past her sister, alone. The elders watched her silently. Then one spoke, its voice like grinding stone. Why do you carry what is not yours? Lyra paused, her hands trembling. I didn't steal it, she said softly. It came to me when I was alone. When I was scared. I thought it was just light, but now I hear their songs in my sleep. Another elder leaned closer, its breath like a furnace. Would you die to protect it? Lyra didn't hesitate. Yes. The room grew hotter, and flames crawled across the ceiling without touching her. The heartstone flared, blinding for a moment, and when the light faded, Lyra was on her knees, gasping for air. Drakkar stepped forward, his voice shaking the floor. She is too weak, her blood is not of fire. But the heartstone suddenly lifted itself from her chest and hovered in the air. Then it split, glowing with two distinct lights, one red like ancient flame, the other gold like a newborn star. Gasps filled the room, even from the dragons. Human's eyes widened. It's dividing, he whispered, choosing to live in two worlds. One half of the stone floated back to Lyra's chest. The other flew toward the human, attaching itself to the chain he wore. A flash of fire exploded. Between them, forming a glowing bond of energy, visible to all, Drakkar growled, confused. What is this? The elders looked at one another, then bowed their heads. She is chosen, they said in unison, but not alone. The Heartstone has decided. A keeper must be guided. Sarah ran to her sister, catching her before she collapsed again. Lyra's body was weak, but her eyes were full of light. The human stepped forward, helping them both up. You are now both part of the flame, he said, but more trials will come. This was only the beginning. Outside, the dragons began to roar again, not in anger, but in something deeper. A sound like ancient approval, like thunder. Singing, a human and an alien girl had passed the test, but the storm on the horizon said it wasn't over yet. The sky was silent, but the land whispered with tension. After the ceremony, the dragons had flown higher, circling like stars caught in fire. Inside the old palace, torches flickered, casting long shadows against ancient stone. Lyra slept beside her sister, her body weak but alive, the golden flame still glowing softly in her chest. The human sat nearby, quiet and watchful, never blinking. He had not spoken since the judgment. As if waiting for something darker to rise, Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice low. You said this wasn't over, she whispered. What did you mean? The human looked up slowly, his eyes colder than before. The Heartstone chose her, yes, he said. But that choice comes with a cost. She stepped closer, heart pounding. What cost? He reached into his satchel and pulled out a weathered book, bound in dragonhide and sealed with ash marks. This is the Codex of Flame, he said, written before even the dragons could fly. He opened it to a torn page and let her read. Her eyes scanned the faded text, her hands beginning to shake. Once the Heartstone splits, its echo shall awaken the sleeper, she read. And the one who carries flame will be hunted. She looked up, confused and scared. Who's the sleeper? The human closed the book, his voice steady and grim. Something the dragons buried long ago, he said. Their secret mistake, outside. A soft quake rippled through the ground, so light it could be missed, less you were waiting for. The human's head turned slowly, eyes fixed on the earth as though he felt something moving underneath. They thought it was dead. He whispered. They were wrong, back in the chamber. Lyra began to mumble in her sleep, her body twitching. Sarah rushed to her side, trying to wake her, but her sister's eyes shot open, glowing too bright to look at. She sees something, the human said, stepping forward quickly. Hold. Her steady. Lyra sat up with a scream that didn't sound like her own. It's coming, she cried, her voice shaking with fear and flame. The shadows, they're rising. They know I have it, and they want it back. Suddenly, the walls of the palace trembled, and a cold wind blew in, despite the fire-lit halls. The dragons outside roared, not with pride this time, but with warning. Something ancient was stirring. A pulse came from the heartstone. Not warm, but sharp and chilling. The light turned darker, flickering violently. The human grabbed Lyra's hand and shouted words in the old tongue, trying to calm the fire. It didn't listen. A gust of wind slammed the chamber door open, and a figure stepped inside. But it wasn't a dragon. It wasn't anything they had seen before. It wore a cloak of black smoke, its eyes glowing like cold embers. Its shape shifted like a broken shadow. It didn't walk, it glided, and wherever it touched, the stone cracked and turned gray. Sarah drew her sword, even though it shook in her hands. The human stood protectively in front of the sisters, his body tense. I warned them, he said under his breath. I told them not to bury it, not to bind it with lies. The creature pointed a hand of smoke toward Lyra, and its voice came like 1,000 whispers. Give it back, it hissed. The flame is not hers. Lyra stood, barely, her eyes glowing, her hand gripping her sister's. It came to me, she said. I won't give it to darkness. The shadow screamed, a sound that shattered glass and made stone cry. The dragons roared again from above, but they didn't descend. They were afraid. Even Drakkar stayed in the clouds. The human raised his hand, the half-stone on his chain glowing in answer. Light and shadow clashed in the chamber. Fire against smoke, past against present. The shadow recoiled, but didn't vanish. It laughed, and its voice echoed everywhere. I am not alone, it whispered, and I will return. It vanished into the wind, leaving behind ice on the walls and blood on the ground. Lyra collapsed again, and Sarah held her tightly. Tears in her eyes, the human knelt, his breath shallow. They've awakened something worse than war, he said, and now she carries its light. Far above, a crack appeared in the sky, faint but growing. A signal, perhaps, or a doorway, and somewhere beneath the earth, something else opened its eyes. The sun never rose the next morning. The sky stayed dark, as if the world itself had closed its eyes. Clouds hung low, thick and unmoving, and the dragons circled in silence like ghosts trapped between flame and fear. On the mountain ridge near the palace, a strange line had formed. Dark figures stood motionless, shoulder to shoulder, their shapes wrong, too tall, too thin too. Still, they were not men, not beasts, not even fully real. They were the sleeper's children. In the palace, Lyra sat by the shattered window, staring at the black horizon. Her eyes no longer shimmered gold. They burned like molten fire. She hadn't spoken in hours, only whispered to the heartstone like it was alive. Sarah stayed close, her blade in her lap, but her thoughts somewhere deeper. Her sister was changing, and she didn't know if it was good or deadly. The human paced silently, his footsteps light but sharp. He kept checking the sky, the wind, the shape of the flames and the torches, reading the signs like an old poem only he could understand. Finally, he stopped and spoke without turning around. They're not going to wait anymore, he said. Tonight, they come. Sarah stood, tense. How many? All of them, he said simply. And the sleeper himself walks behind them. The dragons knew too. They had stopped roaring, stopped flying. Some had landed far away in the mountains. Watching in silence, they feared the sleeper, even Drakkar, because they remembered what the rest had forgotten, that the flame once betrayed the dark, and the dark had never forgiven. Lyra stood slowly, her hair now streaked with red light, her skin warm to the touch. The heartstone pulsed in her chest. Faster than before. I can feel him calling, she said. He's not just coming for me. He wants to take the flame and twist it into shadow. The human moved closer, his voice low. You don't have to face him, he said. I can hold the line. You and Sarah can escape through the tunnels. Lyra shook her head. No. If I run, he'll follow and others will burn. Suddenly, the palace walls shook as if struck by thunder. But there was no sound, only pressure. Like the world had taken a deep breath before screaming. The torches blew out all at once, and the wind stopped moving. Then silence, and then footsteps, not loud but endless. Like a sea of bare feet walking on stone, they were coming. The human pulled 2 old blades from a hidden compartment beneath the stone floor. Both glowing with ancient fire, he handed one to Sarah, and she took it without a word. The air felt thick, almost frozen, outside. The Black Army stood at the gate, unmoving. Then the sleeper stepped forward. He wore no armor, no crown, no weapon. Just a cloak made from the shadows of the dead. And a face that seemed to change each time you blinked. He raised one hand, and the creatures behind him melted into the stone. Crawling up the walls like living cracks, the palace began to fall apart quietly. Slowly, like a dream crumbling at the edges, Lyra stepped out into the courtyard. The hearthstone burning brighter with each step. The sleeper looked at her, and the sky above turned darker still. He did not speak with a voice, but with a feeling. Give it to me. He said inside her mind, you are not worthy. Your body is too small for what it holds. Lyra's knees buckled, but she didn't fall. Sarah and the human ran to her side, holding her up, their eyes fixed on the figure of Nightmare standing only. Steps away, the hearthstone cracked, not broken, but changed from it. A light burst out and formed a barrier around them, fire laced with memory. The sleeper touched the barrier with a single finger, and it hissed in pain. But it didn't fall. The human stepped forward, holding his half of the stone, now glowing red like battle-forged iron. Do you remember me? He asked the sleeper. I was there, in the last war. I saw you fall and vanish into ash. The sleeper tilted his head, and for a second, he smiled, a cold, dead smile. Then he answered not in words, but by lifting the sky itself. The clouds above twisted into a hand of smoke and slammed down toward the palace. The dragons screamed from the mountains, and fire met shadow in the skies. The battle had begun. The sky tore open above the palace ruins. Fire and shadow twisted together. Screaming without sound, dragons roared from the mountains, diving like falling stars into the dark storm. Below, Lyra stood in the center of the broken courtyard, her arms spread wide, her body glowing like a living flame. The hearthstone pulsed inside her chest, cracked but not shattered around her. The world was dying or being reborn. The sleeper moved without walking, gliding across the broken stones, untouched by fire. His shape flickered between human, beast, and something older. The creatures he commanded swarmed the walls, crawling like oil across the stone. They tore through defenses, through dragons, through anything that stood in their way. But they couldn't reach her. The barrier around Lyra, Sarah, and the human still held barely, every second. It dimmed a little more, cracking like glass under pressure. The hearthstone was burning her from the inside, and she knew it. She just didn't stop. Sarah fought beside the human, her blade singing with fire, her eyes fierce and unshaken. Every shadow she struck turned to ash, but more kept coming, endless like a river. The human bled from the shoulder, limping, but he refused to fall. This wasn't a war anymore, it was a last breath. Lyra opened her eyes, tears running down her face, not from fear, but from memory. Inside her mind, she saw visions not her own. A baby dragon taking its first breath, a firestorm that once swallowed the sky, the moment her sister first held her hand when they were children. She understood now. The hearthstone didn't choose her for power. It chose her because she remembered how to feel. The sleeper raised both arms, and the sky cracked like thunder from the split. Something darker began to crawl out, something ancient, alive, and without form. It wasn't just shadow, it was hunger. Lyra stepped forward, past the broken stones, past the barrier, past fear. The heartstone beat one final time, then split completely. Half of its light went into her, the other into the human still standing tall beside her sister. Their bodies lit up, not with fire but with truth. The sleeper lunged, faster than wind, his hand reaching for her chest. But Lyra didn't step back, she stepped into him. The impact wasn't loud, it was soft, like the closing of a book. Light poured out, golden and red, dancing across the sky like stardust. The creatures shrieked and vanished, their forms unraveling like smoke in the morning sun. The sleeper screamed not in pain but in confusion. He was burning from the inside, not from heat, but from everything he had lost. Memory, warmth, love, pain, sacrifice. All of it poured into him through Lyra's touch. He had forgotten what it meant to be alive. Now he remembered, and it broke him. He exploded into ash, carried away by the wind. The sky cleared, slowly, the stars returning one by one like shy children. The black clouds were gone, and the dragons landed in silence. Watching with wide eyes, not one spoke. Lyra collapsed, her body limp, her breath gone. Sarah dropped her sword and ran to her, screaming her name. The human followed, kneeling beside her, pressing a hand to her chest. She gave everything. Sarah whispered, crying, "She's gone." But then, a tiny flicker of flame pulsed beneath her ribs, faint but steady. Lyra opened her eyes slowly, her voice barely there. "I'm still here," she whispered. "The fire stayed with me." The dragons roared together, not in rage but in honor. Their wings opened, and for the first time in 1,000 years, they bowed to a human and an alien girl together. Days later, the palace was rebuilt with dragonstone. The sisters ruled together, with the human beside them, not as a warrior, not as a king, but as a guide. A reminder of what flame truly meant, not war, but light in the dark.